it's not because they're not talking enough. It's not like, because they didn't necessarily speak to someone.
Mm.
It was that, thinking about what actually caused them to get to that stage in the first place. It's a lot of these factors.
Yeah, I mean, male suicide is probably the main issue I talk about. There's just so much to say, so much people are getting wrong, and obviously it devastates so many people. Everyone probably knows someone that's lost someone, a man, to suicide. And as much as I hate catchphrases and the way we described it earlier, I mean, there are fewer places than male suicide that are more beleaguered by catchphrases and very narrow worldviews. Like most of all, the concept of toxic masculinity causing male suicide as some sort of blanket assertion to explain all suicides of all men. And I'm like, if you've met any families, bereaved families or friends of men who have died by suicide, the one thing is often very clear, and they have no idea why that man killed himself, no idea what he was going through. And yet people online claim to have the answer to that man's death and all men's death, and it's the same answer, and it's toxic masculinity that's doing it, and it's just absurd. So in view of that, I obviously want to say that every male suicide is different. I can't possibly give you an answer to every single male suicide. The only way we'd ever know why a man died by suicide is by sitting down and talking to him. But we can't do that anymore because they died. So that's the most important thing I will say. But in general, what I will also say is that whilst male suicide has enjoyed an increased amount of conversation in the press, and good, because it should have a long time ago, we're not talking about it in the right way. A lot of the time we're talking about men need to open up, men need to cry, men need to take better care of their mental health, as if it's a male-inflicted problem. And it sort of ignores the fact that the majority of men who are suicidal don't conceptualize the problem they have as a mental health problem. A lot of them have like a financial problem or a child problem or a family problem or relationship problem or a domestic violence problem, or maybe they've experienced abuse, or maybe they've been bullied, or maybe they're under pressure, maybe they're in debt. I don't know, like a huge number of problems. But like, it's not good enough to say it's a mental health crisis and men need to talk to get themselves out of it, because things like 1 in 5 male suicides in the UK are caused by relationship breakdown and child custody battles. Huge amount of fathers in the UK losing their children in a corrupt family court system. I'm like, that, I don't want to justify it, but that is a totally understandable reason to end your life. Like, if you've lost your child, your relationship's broken up, you've moved out the house, you've lost everything, like that, a man turned to suicide is not mentally unwell. He's just sort of pursuing in a cold way some sort of solution-based outcome to his problem. He's not mentally unwell. He's just lost everything. So it's not right to say he's got some sort of chemical imbalance in his brain which needs to be corrected or fixed through talking or being medicated. It's not good enough to say it's a mental health problem. It's not, because it's not primarily a mental health problem. So it's a series of different problems that push men to suicide because they've got no way out. And although encouraging men to talk does help, it's not a solution. I've often compared it to like a pot of boiling water sat on the stove, and the heat's on and the water's boiling up and it's spilling over, and that's the suicidal man. Taking the lid off is the equivalent of encouraging him to talk. It allows it to breathe, allows it to settle down, it allows it to cool off a little bit. But the heat's still on. The heat's still on, and the lid does actually have to go back on the top. So although taking the lid off, talking does help, doesn't turn off the heat. The heat is something else. The heat is, like I said, some sort of maybe child custody battle. So it's not good enough to say men can talk, because men are talking. Like 91% of men, middle-aged men who died by suicide, did seek help and still died by suicide. So more than 9 in 10 men who died by suicide in that study sought help and still died. Some of them sought help the week before dying. So no, we reject your lazy suggestion of men can talk, men can cry as some sort of silver bullet to male suicide, because it doesn't work, and it hasn't worked. Like, clearly, as much as we talk about male suicide, the rates are still the same. Often they're going up. So clearly it's not working. So let's try something else. Let's actually try listening to what men have got to say. How about that? That'd be nice. Not to say men can talk, and sticking our fingers in our ears when they tell us things we don't want to hear. Like, the amount of times I'm told to shut up and I'm talking about the very things that cause male suicide. I'm like, I was told to talk. Now I'm telling you the thing that's causing male suicide. Now you're telling me to shut up.
Yeah.
So, as always, there's lots of accountability to go around. Lots of lessons to be learned by everyone, including women and men. And enough of these stupid catchphrases, meaningless catchphrases that don't do anything and only piss people off and divide us more.
Well, I think a lot of people as well, like, it's, if you ask the amount of people that like post the, Are You Okay Day or the talk mores and the things like this on social medias, if you actually tried to talk to that person, they'd kind of like, boom, see you later, or they'd dodge the
Yeah,
conversation. They'd, like most people, you can say and try and encourage that talking, but if you're not
mm,
going to, most people won't even then listen. And like you're saying as well, like
mm,
it's then if on even on a professional level, like it's or like government, society, whatever the higher level that has the ability to maybe make some of these changes to maybe it's a systematic thing or whatever it may be, you actually have to do those things, not just kind of take notes and then put it back in the drawer.
absolutely. And that it's uncomfortable. There are uncomfortable conversations to be had. I had a friend who lost someone to suicide, and he sent around the classic message to all the boys in the group saying, if anyone wants to talk, let me know. I'm here to help. We need to talk to each other, which is good. That's taking the lid off the pan. It's good. But then I remember the following week I put up some content on my page about male victims of sexual violence, especially by women. And that's when I saw him next. He pulled me aside and sort of castigated me and told me off for being tone deaf. And I'm like, do you realise that experiences of sexual assault increase the rates of suicide in men and boys 10 times? So a boy who's been sexually assaulted in childhood is 10 times more likely to attempt suicide later in life. So you talk to me about men can talk and should talk about suicide, and now here I am sharing information about one of the biggest causes of suicide that 10x increases it, and you're saying I'm tone deaf.
Mm.
Am I the one that's tone deaf here, or is it
Yeah.
you? And that's a really good microcosm of the problem where everyone wants to talk about men can talk, but like I said, when it comes to listening to what men have got to say, we don't want to fucking hear it because it's
Mm.
difficult and it exposes us to embarrassment and exposes us to the idea that maybe we don't know everything and maybe we are wrong. And we are bloody wrong. When it comes to male suicide, we are so wrong. And like I said, it's causing deaths, like 4,500 male deaths in the UK every year to suicide. And it's just the biggest risk to my life every day and your life. Today, tomorrow, the day after that, every day to be about 50. So that's the reality we're dealing with. That's the failure we've presided over and the devastation it causes.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. A recent podcast to do with like Dr. Tim Sharp, and he talked about obviously, he's a psychologist, and so he had that, once again, he called it the quote unquote extreme view in the eyes of society these days, in that majority, if not almost all depression and anxiety is psychosocial factors, like we're talking about here,
Yeah.
like the things that are happening in someone's life. It's not a biological factor. Like it's
No.
trauma, it's an event, it's like you said, financial stress, it's maybe
Mm.
a relationship stress, whether it doesn't even have to be like a domestic violence sort of based relationship, but maybe just an unhealthy relationship with friends,
Mm.
family, partner, whatever
Mm.
it may be. These are the things pushing someone down that way. And I think most men, and well, people probably in general also, like talking of that, it's not just men that would feel these things, but maybe men have a different bucket of things that kind of push them this way a little bit more. Most guys would resonate with something in that sort of circle that I've just kind of talked about there, where they'll be
Mm.
like, oh yeah, that something in that group, whether it was work, relationship, something there has pushed me to a point where I've never been that upset maybe before. Not to the point where I necessarily even wanted to go that step further, but they felt that lump in the chest.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you really need to understand the male experience to understand what are the issues that are causing male suicide. And a lot of it's lack of purpose. A lot of the purpose we place into men is sort of orbits around money and being a provider, like provider, protector, like work, and that's it. Like you're there to provide for your family. And when men lose that, they lose that sense of purpose. They feel like a burden, and that's when suicide becomes like an actual outcome that they are facing. Like the biggest at-risk group to suicide in the UK today, never discussed, is middle-aged men, often working in construction, living in sort of small rural towns in the north of England. Like I've never seen them campaign for. The whole area of men's mental health advocacy is totally taken up by a bunch of really attractive millionaire men who know very little at all about the actual men experience and have basically centered themselves. And I'm like, just shut up. Just how about you shut up and let the actual men talk who are facing this problem? And like, let's understand what male suicide is. So in the context of that construction worker, often when construction workers in these towns They haven't got a huge amount of savings. They haven't got a huge amount of money. They've often got a family to support. They get to the age of 40 or 50, their back gives out. They can no longer work. They can no longer provide. They accumulate debt. They kill themselves. That's the brutal, like in a nutshell, story about happens again and again and again. And first of all, that no amount of talking for that man is actually going to solve his problem. It will certainly help if you went to a therapist or a men's group and said, I'm really struggling in my back, I'm really struggling. That would absolutely help. But it won't fill his bank account with money. It won't make his back better. It won't give him a new job. So just because we're talking about a problem doesn't mean we're solving it. And I am sick, like I said, sick to death of the men's mental health sector just being taken up by these narcissists, these celebrity men selling books or selling brand deals or whining on their podcasts with their man buns and millions of pounds in the bank, acting like they're any sort of spokesman for men. And they're just not. No, Justin Baldoni, you do not know what it's like to be a normal man. So stop pretending like you do and start giving this platform to people that actually are living this experience, like the man I described. And yeah, I have my own expert who has a similar thing as you, Susie Bennett, who I always shout out. She works a lot of suicidal men. She's a PhD in male suicide. And she has so much experience working firsthand with these suicidal men that are never discussed on podcasts and never discussed by so-called mental health advocates. And she says, when I hear about their problems, their life, their environment, their experiences, I'm like, I'm not surprised that you don't want to be here anymore. That sounds horrible to say, but it's also very validating. And she's like, you're not mentally unwell. You've not got some sort of brain chemistry imbalance. You're just got a fucked up life and no one's helping you. And I'm not surprised that you don't want to be anymore. And that's those men, they're not mentally unwell. They just see suicide as a rational, solution-based outcome.
Yeah.
And no amount of talking will ever solve that. The solution to that is societal change, which, funnily enough, this area of societal change, all our mental health advocates are totally silent, totally silent on it. They don't say anything, and it's an area of despair for me. How bad men's mental health advocates are doing right now, and yet they're getting praise heaped on their head.
Yeah, well, I think as well, like in that as well, like as some of those cases, like you said, you can't just fill a man's bank account. You can't just do these things, and it's but you know, like I guess for some men, it's trying to maybe reach out to them in a way in proving that there are things that can get better. There are, you know, because that man that's feeling that right now, like it's all of the list of things, whatever, they feel like there's nothing. They feel like the only solution is that kind of, I'm going to end it here. That's all I can do. And so, you know, some of those factors, maybe in not all cases, but some cases, maybe a different job is a potential opportunity. A different relationship is a potential opportunity. Living somewhere different is a potential. Now it's not going to solve every one of those issues because some people are bound by different restrictions, but there's a lot of cases where they could have those changes, which then changing those factors, they might be like, oh my God, wow. Yeah, I don't actually want to pursue with this extreme measure. It's something that is changeable and something that can be done.
And the change has to come from out there, from society. Like going back to, I can no longer do this job as a cause of male suicide. That's happening everywhere, not just in construction. But men are disproportionately paying the price of automation, artificial intelligence in America, especially. Like heavy industry, that's going to go. Driving, courier, haulage, that's going to go. Manufacturing, that's all going to go to automation. All be exported overseas, all be lost to AI and that sort of thing. There are not going to be any more lorry drivers in 10 years' time, so that's all going to be self-driving. So what happens to those men? No one's trying to retrain them. No one's presenting them, oh, here's a new job you could possibly do. So we're leading them down the path to suicide. And I think it's like 12 of the 14 job categories expected to grow the most in the next 10 years are dominated by women. And the other two are by men. One of them is a janitor. And I don't see any push to get men into the fields where they're underrepresented. All I hear is advocacy to bring women into the fields, the few remaining fields where they're underrepresented. A lot of it around STEM. And STEM is what I'm talking about. It's just bullshit, mostly bullshit. But there's another acronym which I support called HEAL. So that's healthcare, English, healthcare, education, administration, and language. And those are all areas like healthcare, for example, teaching, we've discussed, administration. These are all different areas of women are dominant, the psychological industry as well. And no one's trying to get men into there. I'm like, if we're going to help address this massive unemployment crisis that's causing men to take their lives, can we not try and get them into teaching or healthcare or nursing or psychology? Like, can we retrain these men through maybe more vocational learning? Let's actually talk about some actual solutions that we can enact as a society, rather than just constantly telling men to talk about it. I'm like, stop talking doesn't solve everything. We need to actually make changes, and one of those changes is what are we going to do with this mass unemployment of men that's causing them to take their lives, turn to addiction, substance abuse, drinking, home, deaths of despair, you call them. And it's like the issue is so much bigger than we pretend it is. Yeah.
And I guess that comes with like looking at, I mean, now some of it is a bit of an unknown as to what industries will exist and what jobs will exist and whatever, but it's kind of like, let's call it like 20 years. Can we try and at least see what the next 20 years look like?
Head over to Jordan Checker Podcast to get the full exclusive experience.